What's up, Bay Savers?
Hey Midpen scientists, are you ready to explore some ecosystems? Today I'll be exploring the ecosystem at Alpine Pond in Skyline Ridge Open Space Preserve, where we hold our free field trip program.
And you'll join me on the shoreline of the San Francisco Bay, checking out the Tidal Marsh. We'll be exploring the similarities and differences between these two locations. We'll learn a little bit about ecosystems, and you're going to find out how you can explore ecosystems near you. So what is an ecosystem? An ecosystem is a community of living and non-living things that are dependent on one another. You're in an ecosystem right now. The air you breathe, the plants around you, and the animals, it's all connected.
Why do you think it's important to think of spaces as ecosystems?
As I mentioned, ecosystems contain living things, and we call these parts biotic. Biotic means alive or was once alive. How do we know something is alive? Well, living things eat, breathe, grow, and reproduce. What living things do you see in this shot? Did you notice the geese? How about all the bird sounds? Did you know that all the plants in this shot are alive too?
So if the scientific word for living things is biotic, what's the scientific word for non-living things? That would be abiotic. Abiotic refers to things that were never alive, but can still have an impact on living things. Some cultures believe that all things are alive because everything is connected and can impact life. Water, temperature, and elevation are examples of abiotic things that determine what living things can thrive in an ecosystem.
We're going to use a guide to capture our observations of the ecosystem we're exploring. The guide is split into 4 sections, including 2 biotic and 2 abiotic sections. Together, we'll explore each section at a time. Nina, do you have your ecosystem guide?
Yep, I do. And all you need to follow along is a piece of paper and something to write with. Fold your paper in half, then in half again, and you have an Ecosystem Explorer guide. You can also download one in the description of the video. Pause the video to record your observations of the Baylands so that at the end, you have a completed Ecosystem Explorer guide of your own. First, we'll look at the plants. There can be so many and it can feel really overwhelming. So to start, we'll zoom out and look at the whole landscape. Then we'll pick what we think is the most common plant of our area of study, in this case, the pond, and then we'll focus on that. So from here, we can see these grass-like plants growing straight out of the pond and some trees and shrubs behind them. So which plant is the most common? It depends how we define our area. So for this activity, we're focusing specifically on the pond, which means that this grass-like plant would be the most common plant. These are called cattails. So let's take a closer look at the cattails. What do you notice? We'll record our observations using a scientific drawing. It can be helpful to think about taking notes for someone who's not out in the field with you. What would you tell them so that they can find whatever you're making observations of? Making a scientific drawing is not about making a pretty picture, but about recording your observations. So I noticed that these cattails are long, green, and that they stand up on their own with multiple leaves coming out of the same stalk. I also noticed that there are some brown, crunchy ones that are falling over right next to them. And if I look up at the top, there's something that reminds me of a hot dog on a stick. So let's include those details.
Now, here's a wide view of the tidal marsh at the Palo Alto Baylands. How many different plants do you see? Pause the video and record your observations. We see a lot of low-lying plants surrounded by water and some tall bushes at the high edge of the marsh. The plant we see the most is pickleweed. Here's a close-up. What do you notice? Remember to draw what you see and write down your observations and questions.
Why do you think certain plants are only found in certain areas of the Baylands and not others?
That's a great question, Charlie, and we'll start to answer it by checking out the soil in our ecosystem. So, time to be a scientist and get a little dirty. You're going to dig down, you might need a stick, about the length of your pinky, and then pick up some soil, add a little bit of water, and then rub it between your fingers. What does it feel like? How it feels can give us some clues about what it's made out of. So if it's really gritty, then it's made out of sand. If it's sticky, then there's clay in it. And if it's really smooth, that means your soil is mostly silt. So I reached into the pond to get a soil sample from the bottom, and here it is. It is pretty soft and smooth, so mostly silt and clay. It's very gray in color. And then I took a soil sample from just outside the pond, and it is a little different. It's a little more gritty and slightly more brown in color. Charlie, what's the soil like down at the Baylands?
Down in the tidal zone, the soil is really sticky and smooth. Up near the top, it feels more gritty and rough.
We can observe the animals that spend time around the pond. We'll sit in one spot and stay quiet and still. What can you hear? What can you see? And then we'll record it.
Since it may be difficult at times to catch a glimpse of the animals in your ecosystem, you can always look for evidence of things that might live there, like this.
Evidence is little bits of information, like tracks, fur or feathers, sounds, and other signs of life. Record the evidence you find in the animal section of your guide. You can draw the evidence or just write it down.
The final section of our guide is for us to explore climate. Climate is the weather conditions over long periods of time.
A good way to think about the difference between weather versus climate is to think about an outfit versus your entire closet. Weather is going to determine what outfit you wear on any given day, but the climate will determine all the clothes that you have in your closet that you would need over the course of a whole year. So we'll have to come back during different seasons to gather more data and have a better understanding of the climate.
We can make observations about the weather now and return in another season. Some things to think about. What's the temperature outside? Is it cloudy or clear? Is there lots of shade where you are, or is it nice and open?
So now that we've completed our guides for each ecosystem, how do they compare?
Nina and I observed similar soil in the wettest part of our ecosystems. However, in the driest part, our soil was pretty different.
So the plant life is very different in our ecosystems too. Here at the pond, we see trees and shrubs, but in the pond, mostly cattails. At the bay shore, there are no trees to be seen, but just lots of low bushy plants.
Why do you think we see these similarities and differences?
Ecosystems are different because abiotic conditions are different. The non-living parts of an ecosystem determine what lives there. If those circumstances change, the wildlife changes.
Why is it important to know this information? What can we do with these observations? Recall that abiotic factors impact what biotic factors can thrive in an area. Tracking the changes of abiotic and biotic factors over time helps us to understand how ecosystems might change and how we can protect them in the future.
For example, we know that the sea level is rising due to global warming. Save the Bay is restoring tidal marsh on the shoreline in preparation for this changing abiotic factor. Restoring tidal marsh on the shoreline will protect our communities and bring back habitat for wildlife.
Midpen works to protect plants, animals, water, soil, and historical and cultural resources, which has impacts well beyond the lands that we manage. I've come now to the Sag Pond at Montebello Open Space Preserve, just a short distance from where we were at Alpine Pond. It connects to Stevens Creek, which moves water from one ecosystem to another, eventually leading to the Baylands, very near where you are, Charlie. Both Save the Bay and Midpen are managing these resources because we understand that even between different ecosystems, everything is connected.
In review, answer these questions. What are biotic and abiotic factors? What's the difference between weather and climate? Give an example of how a changing abiotic factor would affect a biotic factor. We hope this video has inspired you to get outside and get to know your ecosystem better.